Welcome back to Recruits Habcast. This is a solemn occasion that I'm getting together with Liam here, and he's about to go off, surprise, surprise, golfing. But
I try and play
yeah,
once a day, Grant.
what's that?
I try and play once a day.
Yeah, yeah, okay. It seems like you try to do a little Habscast with me once a day lately too. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But obviously, the passing. I woke up this morning to the news of Ken Dryden's passing. I wasn't even aware that he had cancer, and you don't always hear these things. But bit of a shock. He personally, my first real memories of the NHL playoffs were I was 7 years old, 70, 71. My sister was a huge Boston Bruins fan, and they had just set a record, shattered the record for goals for in a season, 399. I believe the old record was 280. So that's something you'll never see another club get 119 more goals than the NHL record. The top four scorers in the league that year were Bruins. And my lasting memory of, other than the Jean Beliveau and all that 7-5 crazy game where they came back, is Phil Esposito slamming his stick on the ice and looking up to the heavens, because this guy here, I'll just quickly.
There it is, the iconic.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wow, that's the iconic photo, obviously, with his height. There were some tall goalies around at the time, Gary Smith being pretty much the same size as Ken, but nobody had ever thought, Ken kind of needed to do it because the puck wasn't down his end of the ice very often. And that's a great one you dug up there about Boston beating the record. You think about it, the Oilers hold the record right now at 446, so they beat it only by 47 goals. They had 4 seasons of over 400 goals scored in their heyday with Gretzky and company. So obviously the number one offensive juggernaut in NHL history. What the Bruins did in 71, they set something like 30, 35 team and individual and NHL records all combined. I believe it was 35 or 37 in 70-71. Habs were 24 points behind them in the standings, had no business winning the series. Boston were defending cup champs. You had Orr in his prime, Espo, the whole gang. And Ken came in. I'd say he stood on his head, but that really statistically wouldn't be true, right, Grant? I mean, he played 20 playoff games that year, and he allowed 60 goals, including a couple games. He got lit up large by Boston, by Chicago, even against Minnesota. But when they needed the W's and when they needed the saves, he got it done, much like in 72 with Team Canada. So his numbers weren't the greatest in that series, obviously, nor were they the greatest in 1971, but he still won the Conn Smythe Trophy in a close vote over Frank Mahovlich. Some feel should have gone the other way, but Dryden was a deserved winner as well for winning the big games and making the big saves. Espo in Game 7 and Jim Pappen in Game 7 as well. Both Game 7s in the quarterfinal and in the final, respectively. He made 2 iconic saves. So, in fact, Phil Esposito called him an effing giraffe post-game, and Jim Pappen said, well, the proof's in the pudding. My stick was in the air. I thought the puck was in, and it wasn't until it was when Ken saved it. So, hell of a loss, man. What a legacy on and off the ice.
Yeah, for sure. Was it Phil Muir and Rogie Vachon were the goalies that year, and they were a little disappointed. They'd struggled somewhat, and they brought in this kid from U.S. college hockey, which was not that common, especially goalies, I don't think. And he played Nova Scotia Voyageurs and played 6 games and was fantastic. But was that the first time that an NHL team had decided to go with what was basically a raw rookie in nets to start the playoffs?
I don't recall anybody starting the playoffs with that little NHL action played. I'd have to give that some thought, but the 6 games were all victories, 1.65 goals against average, and I've interviewed pretty much everybody on that team. Of course, many have passed, but even those that are still alive, I've talked to them all at various times. And to a man, they told me, look, Liam, we couldn't score on the guy in practice. It was a shock maybe to the rest of the hockey world, but they weren't at the Forum watching us practice. Like, we couldn't score on him in practice. It was very reminiscent if you talk to players about Dominik Hasek in his prime with the Sabres. Not so much Detroit. He got the cup there, but they were so strong. But with the Sabres, so many guys I've talked to said, we hardly score on the guy in practice. He fought and battled for every single puck. In Dryden's case, he was just that much better. And that they hadn't had a Montreal Canadian goaltender with that size and that agility. So it was a, perfect storm. And he came in and just absolutely stirred it up like a tempest in a teapot and went on to get that cup win. Obviously, they lose the next year in the quarterfinals. Beliveau retires. A little bit of a hangover, I think, with him and Fergie gone. Scotty comes in, first-year coach, and they lose in the quarters. And they have another great season. It gets overshadowed. The 72-73 year, with only 10 losses, gets totally overshadowed by that late run in the 70s. But Ken's a big part of that. And then people think he quit hockey for a year. He didn't quit. He had a contract holdout. He was being paid $60,000 a year. He had a year to go on his contract. He had just won the cup, and he went to Sam and said, I want more money. And Sam said, finish the deal, and we'll take care of you. No. Well, screw you. So he left, and he articled, and he played defense. He wasn't, because he was under contract, he could not play in net for any other team. And he played for a team called Vulcan Packaging in Toronto. He was a defenseman. He was terrible. He wore number 3. And he articled and pursued his law studies. And then he went back to Sam. He said, all right, let's fix this. And they did. And they sat down, and he came back, and Sam gave him a new deal. But the rest is history. I don't think he was ever the same, to be perfectly honest.
No,
I don't think he was.
Especially that first year when he came back, he was pretty average. And Philly won the cup. And then the second year he was better. And, Perron wasn't there, and the Habs won the cup. Would have been interesting if it had been Perron against, it probably wouldn't have been a 4-game sweep that year if
no, they were missing Rick McLeish too. Like they were missing one of their big guns, and of course, career goaltender. In fact, Bernie Perron had the greatest season of any goalie ever in 73-74, in my opinion. I don't believe any goaltender from start to finish had a season like Bernie Perron in 73-74. So that was a big loss. I still think the Habs win the series, but you're right. I don't think it would have been in 4 games. And it was the start of the second part of the Dryden legacy on the ice. There's no doubt about it. And look, I said this earlier in another interview that Montreal's goals against from 73 to 74 went from 180 to 240. So that's with largely the same roster minus Sean Fergie. So that was largely because of Ken. Ken in 73, that playoff run in 71, albeit statistically not great, but still he got the W, won the cup, won the Conn Smythe. 72, they lose first round. Summit Series, he plays okay, gets the key wins. Game 6, first star. Game 8, shuts them down third period. We get the W. Regular season, okay, not great. Bruins are taking over again. And then the Habs come back in 73. Ken sits out. And then the legacy starts the year after he comes back. So his numbers are what they are. Grant, they're phenomenal. His 1-loss record. But look, he's part of that dynasty, right? They were, at any given year, they had 8 to 10 Hall of Famers on those rosters. So it was, in fact, 1973, they had 11. That's the most Hall of Famers on any Stanley Cup winning team in history. 11 Hall of Famers, Montreal 1973. I think Detroit might be tying it, but Montreal had the most ever. No one's had more. No one will ever have more. And Dryden was part of that. So tremendous legacy, buddy.
Well, 6 cups in 8 years. No one will ever do that again, I don't think.
No. I mean, Turk Broda with Toronto, and obviously Jacques Plante with the 5 in a row, but and Broda had a good run too after, like, he was overseas for the war. So Frank LeCoul was in that cup win in 45, but Broda was a hell of a goalie too. It wasn't. It is what it is. I mean, the numbers are what they are, and you're right, man. 6 and 8 is just insane.
Like for his career,
absolutely insane.
75%, in his career, cup winner.
Yeah,
74%. win percentage in the regular season, and just as even more impressive, 71% in the playoffs. You know, just absolutely phenomenal. And I don't think it's any coincidence. Yeah, sure, Scotty left and Jacques Lemaire retired, but soon as Ken retired too, you know, for good, the Canadiens, the dynasty ended too, right? So
I will say again, just my own opinion here, but I personally think he saw the writing on the wall. His skills diminished very quickly in those last couple years that he played, 78 and 79. In particular, 79 in the playoffs, he was not good. I mean, we snatched victory from the jaws of defeat against the Bruins thanks to Guy Lafleur. You needed Guy Lafleur's greatest game ever in Game 7 to beat Boston. It wasn't because of Ken. He was horrible. Like that goal that gave him a 4-3 lead, that wraparound by Middleton, that should never have gone in, along with many others. He wasn't even supposed to start Game 2 of the final. The only reason he did is Doug Risebrough broke Bunny LaRocque's finger in warm-up. I was there. I was at the game. I saw them carry Bunny or walk with Bunny, went off the ice. They were holding his hand, and Dryden came in as a starter after he laid a total egg. And we're down, I think 1 or 2-0 in Game 2. It looked horrible, but then the rest of the Habs woke up, took over, got over the hangover of getting by the Bruins, and then won the series. And Ken, I believe Ken said, "I'm done," and decided to pack it in at the age of 31. People say, he was prove. I disagree. I think he could have proved a lot more, but I think he saw the writing on the wall. His time was up, and he solidified his legacy with another cup, and he went on to his post-hockey career.
Like you said, you know, post-career and that, the books that he wrote, and what an articulate man he was, eh?
Well, it's a Joe Juno was legitimately a rocket scientist. So that expression gets used a lot, right? What do you think you are, a rocket scientist, a rocket, something like that? And he had that type of level of intelligence. Ken Dryden's intellect was virtually unparalleled in NHL history and maybe sports. It's certainly in the discussion. And then it's his forays into the political arena, with different levels of success, culminating, of course, with being a senator. That's when I interviewed him. One of the times I interviewed him. I worked with him many times, Grant, on Team Canada 72 reunions, although he did not come every year. He would only come in the significant years. And I'll finish on this note, buddy. There was a show on TSN for years called Off the Record.
Yes.
I was a regular guest on it, and I appeared one time with Ken, and we kind of locked horns a little bit on fighting in hockey as he became a strong opponent of it, more so after his career was over. He didn't really like that I pointed that out. And where was that commentary when you had Robinson, Bouchard, Lupien, Risebrough, Tremblay, Lambert? I mean, if anybody even breathed on Ken, they had the army coming. And I just felt it was a little disingenuous. And so I don't want to be a hypocrite and turn around and say, look, everything he said was absolute gospel to me. But having said that, I feel it was a privilege and an honor anytime I did have occasion to work with him or be with him. And when the Team Canada 72 had their 50th anniversary in Toronto, I had no formal duties. It was a pared down event because so many of the guys couldn't get there because of health. And as a result, and Pat Stapleton had passed away suddenly. So Ken Dryden and Serge Savard had taken over. And Serge was in my corner, but he had to convince Ken. And he said, look, Liam just wants to be there. He just wants to be with us. He has spent so much time with us. And Ken okayed it. And it may seem like a small thing, but it wasn't. I got to be with them physically the entire weekend that they celebrated the 50th anniversary of the greatest game and greatest series ever in the history of the sport. So I'll finish on that note, buddy. And his legacy is beyond intact, beyond reproach. And he will always be remembered for sure.
Rest in peace, Kenny, and thank you so much for doing this, Liam.
No problem, buddy. We'll chat with you soon.